Volcanic super eruptions give very little advance warning, scientists warn. A new study determined that super eruptions, volcanic events so large they spew out hundreds of cubic kilometers of magma and ash, typically only give 1 year's warning before they erupt, a prospect which would leave humanity very little time to prepare for the worldwide devastation produced by such a super eruption. The 2010 eruption of the Iceland volcano Eyjafjallajökull disrupted air traffic and coated much of northern Europe with volcanic ash, while the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state, May of 1980, which was the deadliest and most economically costly volcano to blast in U.S. history, covered 11 states with ash, and neither of these disasters comes close, though, to the power and devastation what geologists refer to as a super eruption, a volcanic explosion that registers highest on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, sending up to between 100 and 1,000 cubic kilometers of ejecta into Earth's atmosphere. Scientists long tried to pinpoint when and where the next supervolcano will erupt. Researchers now at Vanderbilt University, University of Chicago, have used microscopic analysis of quartz crystals to conclude that the decompression process, which releases gas bubbles prior to such an eruption, begins less than a year before the actual event. Less than a year. The study's authors, whose research published in scientific journal PLOS ONE, said super eruptions have been described as the ultimate geological hazard, and in many ways, understanding the potential hazards associated with super eruptions is the ultimate geological exercise in which we're pressed to learn as much as possible from geological records of past super eruptions. Researchers look at quartz collected from the Bishop Tuff Rock Formation in eastern California, and that was at the Long Valley Caldera supervolcano eruption. That super eruption was 760,000 years ago. They found that the telltale rims which form the quartz crystals in the lead up to that eruption developed just days and months before the explosive event. They said more than 70% of the rim growth times are less than 1 year. The closest thing to such an event in recent history was Mount Tambora eruption that was in Indonesia in 1815 that ejected approximately 180 cubic kilometers of material in just a few days and precipitated in what was called the Year Without a Summer in 1816, a volcanic winter that plummeted the global temperatures. It caused massive famine and civil unrest for the decades to follow. The last true super eruption occurred 26,000 years ago in the North Island of New Zealand, where we had December 9 White Island volcano eruption. That's the Taupo volcano, and that is a supervolcano, 26,000 years ago. Preceded by the Toba super eruption in Sumatra, 75,000 years ago. Another super eruption, 75,000 years ago. The Taupo New Zealand eruption, 26,000 years ago. Again, a super eruption. The anthropologists found that only 2,000 human couples survived worldwide after that super eruption. So that was almost a global extinction event for humans. And they believe that a lot of animal life and plant life also did find their demise from that. Now, historically, North America has seen super eruptions at the Yellowstone caldera in Wyoming, and in Canada at what's known the Blake River mega caldera on the border between Ontario and Quebec. Now, why is a super eruption so devastating? That's because of the volcanic ash. That's the main problem. Billions of tons of particulates traveling through the air, making breathing difficult, also blocking up the sun, covering everything in sight for thousands of kilometers around, the ash from a super eruption would contaminate lakes and rivers, making the region close to the volcanic site, of course, unlivable, uninhabitable. Also, sulfur compounds in the ash would reflect sunlight, bringing about a volcanic winter, or we call it nuclear winter, threatening agricultural production, of course, worldwide. The chances of a super eruption occurring in the near future are slim, but geologists have not seen the telltale signs of significant magma buildup under any of the known supervolcano sites around the world, which are about 20. And as far as we can determine, they say none of these places currently house a type of melt-rich giant magma body needed to produce a super eruption. This is what Guilherme Gualda, professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences at Vanderbilt University, co-author of this new study, says. He says, however, there are places where super eruptions have happened in the past, so are more likely to happen in the future. And according to USGS, how far in advance could scientists predict an eruption of the Yellowstone volcano? The Yellowstone. The science of forecasting a volcanic eruption has significantly advanced over the past 25 years. Most scientists think that the buildup preceding a catastrophic eruption would be detectable for weeks and perhaps months to years. Precursors to volcanic eruptions include strong earthquake swarms and rapid ground deformation, and typically take place days to weeks before an actual eruption. Scientists at the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory closely monitor the Yellowstone region for such precursors, and they expect that the buildup to larger eruptions would include intense precursory activity, far exceeding background levels that we have now, at multiple spots within the Yellowstone volcano. As at many caldera systems around the world, small earthquakes, ground uplift and subsidence, and gas releases at Yellowstone are commonplace events and do not reflect impending eruptions. Now, what are some examples of supervolcanoes? USGS says, volcanoes that have produced exceedingly voluminous pyroclastic eruptions and formed large calderas in the past 2 million years include Yellowstone, also Long Valley caldera in eastern California, Toba in Indonesia, and Taupo in New Zealand. Other supervolcanoes would likely include the large caldera volcanoes of Japan, Indonesia, and Alaska. For example, Aniak Chak. How many active volcanoes are there on Earth? There are about 1,500 potentially active volcanoes worldwide, aside from the continuous belts of volcanoes on the ocean floor at spreading centers like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. About 500 of those 1,500 volcanoes have erupted in historical time, in our time that is, and many of those are located along the Pacific Rim in what is known as the Ring of Fire. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.